Hey folks, my name is Mo Amir and this is VANCOLOUR, British Columbia's bona fide culture and politics TV talk show. We have a spicy lineup tonight with a potluck of perspectives. Comedian Dino Archie will walk us down the low road of conspiracy theories to explain why he distrusts certain government narratives. Plus, is Canadian multiculturalism faltering? Is diversity our strength? If it is, wouldn't workplaces want to be more diverse? What is the value of diversity? Here to discuss is a reporter at the Tyee whose recent book, Under the White Gaze, explores how Canadian media falls short on representation and why that's concerning. He is Christopher Cheung. Chris, thanks so much for being here tonight.
Thanks so much for having me.
So I feel like the term DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, gets thrown around a lot. Some people are now using it as a pejorative. But what does a diverse workplace look like?
Yeah, it is weird to hear it used as a slur in that way that you mentioned.
It sounds kind of racist when they do, but yeah. Sure, yeah.
So as a journalist, I can talk about what that means for newsrooms.
Sure.
Newsrooms ultimately are a workplace. And so DEI, that stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think it's we know that it's a good thing to have a mix of people in our workplaces, whether that's by like gender or race or so on. I think if we had a newsroom that was all men, I think we know that there'd be a lot of blind spots with the kinds of stories that they'd be covering. But aside from just having a diverse makeup of the newsroom too, it's also about opportunities to succeed. So if you did have someone who was, say, a woman coming into that all-male newsroom, would they be able to have the same kinds of opportunities, or would they be facing different barriers as well? The interesting thing about a newsroom is that, newsrooms do news stories. Mm-hmm. And, me living in Vancouver, I think anybody who spent time in Vancouver knows that Vancouver is a very diverse place.
Yeah.
And if we were to miss out on stories that cover everybody, we'd be missing a huge chunk of what's actually happening in our society.
Now, just explain again the value of diversity, because some people might say, well, if you're a journalist or a reporter, you should be objective anyways, or at least fair. You should be looking out for stories and elevating other voices in the stories itself. So then why does diversity in the newsroom actually matter?
Yeah, well, I think if you don't have a newsroom that has different types of people, you're not going to be able to get different types of stories. And if you don't have different types of stories, we're not going to know what's happening in our society. Along all of those lines that I mentioned.
Do you have an example where maybe this played out? I know there's a few in your book.
Yeah. So I talk a lot about the importance of having people of color in newsrooms. So aside from just, knowing what stories that might be missed, I think they also have this, if you're a racialized person, you have a gut feeling when there's something that's wrong. So during the pandemic, I remember the cover of The Province. They put out China virus over one of those bits of coronavirus, right there on the cover.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So to me, I was thinking, if there was somebody who was racialized in that newsroom making that decision, or in that at the table making those decisions, they would kind of know that this is not something we would want to put out because it's a bit stigmatizing. And I know you've talked a lot about the election here on your show, and I would hope that for battlegrounds like Surrey or Richmond that a lot of people were paying attention to this time around. These are very much immigrant places. Surrey is very working class in particular. So I think if you don't have people in your newsroom who are attuned to the dynamics there, we'd be missing out what's on people's minds as they're going to vote.
Now, a lot of people, when they hear diversity, they feel it's code for non-white. So what do you say to people who say, well, diversity is just code for pushing white people, particularly white men, outside of their professions? And really, any profession should be based on merit alone.
Yeah. I think it's weird to use that word as anything that's non-white, because that means we're both diverse people.
Which I'm sure you've been categorized as. I mean, I have, certainly.
Yeah. I think it's silly to say that we have a forced diversity problem, because I think that we actually have a problem of diversity being forced out, especially in the media industry. We know that it is very white dominated. And not only,
but I see people of color, as anchors or news reporters all the time. What would you say to that?
Yeah, so I think it's important to look at the power dynamics too. So the data is very clear that for the people who are making decisions, in management, those are the folks that tend to be white. And for the for people of color who are in the industry, they are very much overrepresented in part-time and internship roles too. Yeah, and I think like for merit, like I don't see that there's any evidence that people of color are being hired just for their identity and are terrible at their jobs.
Right.
I think any good employer would be looking at things like experience or education when they're picking someone to join the team. And I would hope that they would also look at other kinds of merit too, like if there's somebody from a background and has different insights that are missing from their newsroom, that they would be considering that in their hire.
Now, for any workplace, and we can talk about newsrooms specifically, if there was an employer that wanted to make their workplace more diverse, obviously they can't just, tick a box in terms of hiring. So how do they start embedding the type of culture that would accommodate a more diverse workplace?
Yeah, we hear that term like diversity hire a lot. And I don't think anybody wants to be a diversity hire, even if they can have a job at the end of the day. So I think it's important not to put the burden of all the diversity stories onto any one reporter that they hire. And maybe if that person like doesn't want to be pursuing like cultural stories or something to do with their background, they don't have to. So I would hope that this is something that any workplace, it's a burden that everybody shoulders. And in whatever that they're working on, if it's in a newsroom covering beats like politics or labor or environment, that they'd be considering these kinds of intersections as well.
Fascinating. But then, like, how do you ensure that, I guess, is my question.
Yeah, I think just being very reflective all the time. Like earlier you mentioned that newsrooms are very much obsessed with this idea of objectivity, but I think it's still important to realize that, we all come from somewhere. The audience that we're serving is all going to be different, and that we need to be catering news to a more universal audience.
Now, ultimately, there is some good in Canadian media in terms of our diversity. I mean, certainly we do see a lot of stories reflecting different communities, just maybe not to the depth that would be accurate. Is that a fair assessment?
I think so. I used to think when I got into this industry that anytime I could get a person of color in my stories, that was a win. But then I think,
is that not good enough, Chris?
Well, I think that just says something about how starved we are for representation, that we'd be happy with just seeing ourselves or getting somebody's name in there. But beyond that, I started to ask these questions about like, well, what are the kinds of stories that people of color are showing up in? Is it the same kinds of stories over and over again?
Are they showing up in the same types of stories?
We do see a lot of stories about culture, about food, celebrations, that kind of thing. Like there is a lot of coverage in Surrey of Vaisakhi, like for example, the parade. But what about those kinds of day-to-day stories of what people are dealing with on a daily basis? And not so much of that, those model minority stories that we see a lot, or stories about people of color as villains.
Fascinating. Chris, congratulations on the book, and thank you so much for your time tonight.
Great, thanks for having me.
Folks, that was the Tyee's Christopher Cheung. Make sure you pick up his book, Under the White Gaze, Solving the Problem of Race and Representation in Canadian Journalism, available at your local bookstore. We're going to continue the conversation, zooming out to ask, is Canadian multiculturalism faltering? We'll talk about it up next.